Hello, my name is Edward Sonino. Open TED, I've got really good news. There is a way to prevent recessions and high unemployment forever, and federal debt is not a problem. Having endured a long, deep recession with very high unemployment and with an explosion of budget deficits and federal indebtedness, there is much pessimism about our nation's economic future. Indeed, we have endured two deep recessions since the year 2000, and the government's total debt of $18 trillion has reached what many believe are dangerous levels, having reached almost 100% of our annual gross domestic product. Meanwhile, real unemployment, which includes part-time workers seeking full-time jobs and discouraged workers no longer actively seeking employment, it remains high at 9% since the economic recovery has been weak. There is widespread discontent with fear that high real unemployment will persist and that low and middle incomes will continue to stagnate. The living standards of many Americans have declined substantially, and the worry is that they may never rise again. For many, the American dream has been shattered. What's depressing is that our political leaders and the entire economics profession have shown that they don't have any solutions. The fear among many Americans is that there are no solutions for returning the economy to economic and social prosperity. The good news is that there is an easy and very effective solution to quickly get the economy rolling again and American incomes rising. That solution, once understood by our political leaders, will even prevent long recessions and high unemployment from ever happening again. Sounds too good to be true? It's not. Many will be skeptical, but with an open mind, the solution is clear and convincing. Here it is. Simply have QE finance tax rebates as the standard economic stimulus policy. Let me explain how it works. First, it's important to understand that all recessions and unemployment are caused by insufficient consumer demand relative to the country's productive capacity. And when we have insufficient consumer demand, it's because personal incomes are too low. So it follows logically that to get an increase in consumption, we need to have an increase in personal income. What better and faster way to increase personal incomes than to have a tax rebate? There is none. Tax rebates are not only the fastest and most effective way to stimulate the economy, they are the fairest way since all taxpayers receive the exact same stimulus check. Just consider the largely ineffective and unfair Obama stimulus in 2009, which amounted to $800 billion, but only benefited a small number of Americans, being targeted to help new home buyers, buyers of fuel-efficient cars, certain infrastructure companies, and state and local workers. Not only did most Americans receive absolutely nothing from the Obama stimulus, but it did not benefit those Americans most in need of financial help. Instead, had the Obama stimulus consisted entirely of a tax rebate, each and every taxpayer would have received a $5,000 check from the U.S. Treasury. A family of two taxpayers would have received two checks totaling $10,000. That would have immediately jump-started the economy by increasing personal income and consumption, and it would have stopped the housing and banking crisis in its tracks, as families in financial difficulty would have suddenly had the means to keep current on their mortgages. Isn't that clear and convincing? Furthermore, by having tax rebates paid directly by the Federal Reserve or financed by the Fed through QE, there would be no increase in federal debt since QE financing consists of printed money by the Federal Reserve. Many will object that printing money is inflationary, but that is not necessarily true. In fact, we have had over $3 trillion of QE by the Fed over the past few years as it printed money to purchase newly issued Treasury bonds to finance the budget deficits. Yet, inflation has remained at historic lows. How is that possible? Simply because the amount of new money printed by the Fed was not excessive. That is, it did not cause excess aggregate demand, the situation of too much money chasing too few goods. Today, we would need a QE finance tax rebate of $2,000 to $3,000 to get the economy rolling again and real unemployment back down to low levels, all without inflation. Last but not least, it's important to understand that Treasury bonds purchased by the Fed through QE and held to maturity expire at no interest or capital cost to the U.S. Treasury. In fact, all Treasury bonds held by the Fed, which today total over $4 trillion, are not real debt, only virtual debt, posing absolutely no burden to the government or the American taxpayers. How is that? The Fed is a government agency, and as such, it annually returns to the U.S. Treasury all the interest it receives on its Treasury bond holdings, and whenever some of its Treasury bond holdings mature, the Fed returns the capital repayment to the Treasury. So, we need our political leaders to understand that QE finance tax rebates should be the standard economic stimulus tool. How would that work? Whenever the real unemployment rate rises above 5%, the Fed, together with the President and leaders of Congress, would get together and determine how much of a rebate is required to quickly get back to full employment. Just imagine, with QE finance tax rebates as the standard economic stimulus policy, we would never again have long recessions and high unemployment, and low and middle income Americans would never again suffer from long periods of wage stagnation. Economic prosperity would be sustained. It's up to Americans to make their political leaders see the light. So, spread the word. For a more detailed explanation, please view my 16-minute YouTube video titled How to Prevent Recessions and High Unemployment Forever. Thanks for your attention.